Hi guys, and welcome to today's video. First of all, I want to say a massive thank you for 100,000 subscribers. I cannot believe it. The last video I did was pre-recorded like a little while ago, so obviously I didn't know if I would hit this by now, but I am very overwhelmed. This is totally unplanned, but thank you so much, and in the near future I will do a proper video about this as well as a giveaway, so keep your eyes out for that. But today's video is a highly requested one. It's a basic guide to caring for and handling crested geckos. So like my leopard gecko care video, we will cover 5 main topics: setup, heating, lighting, diet and handling. But first, here's some information and history about the crested gecko. Crested geckos, also known by their Latin name Corallophus ciliatus, formerly known as Rhacodactylus ciliatus, are semi-arboreal, sticky-footed, eyelid-free, crested-headed eyelash geckos native to New Caledonia. They're predominantly found on the islands of Grande Terre and the Isle of Pines. They were previously thought to be extinct up until their rediscovery in the 90s. Now sadly their conservation status in the wild is classed as vulnerable due to the destruction of habitat and the introduction of invasive species such as fire ants. Because of this, I think it's our duty to make sure the ones we have in captivity have the very best care. They're often bought as easy reptiles to care for, and although in comparison to a lot of other reptiles they're fairly easy to look after, this doesn't mean that they're easy pets to care for. They have quite a few requirements, and if not fulfilled, it can leave you with a very sick, undernourished and under-energized gecko. They can live for 20 years or more, so let's aim for that. First up, setup. Crested geckos aged about 6 months and above can live in tanks that are 45 by 45 by 60 centimeters tall. This is the minimum size. Younger geckos will require smaller tanks since they're absolutely tiny as hatchlings, and you want to minimize the risk of them falling and hurting themselves. You can use bigger tanks for adults. For example, my crested gecko lives in a 60 by 45 by 60 centimeter terrarium. I think glass terrariums are a bit better than mesh since they hold in a lot more humidity. Now make sure you never house 2 males together, a male and female together, or a hatchling and adult together. Now in terms of decorations, you want plenty. Not only so the gecko has lots to climb on, but also so it has lots to hide in. This is very important for reducing stress. Driftwood, cork hollows, branches are all great climbing apparatus for crested geckos. You want to make sure the gecko can get from the bottom to the top of its tank safely and securely. Now as for plants, you can use real ones or artificial ones. Just make sure the real ones you use are safe. Personally, I prefer natural tanks for crested geckos. Now for substrate, some people use paper towel, and I understand their concerns and why they do this. Personally, I tried it for a bit, but the humidity was awful. So I used to use Eco Earth, but for now, when I have my natural tanks, I use Earth Mix by Arcadia. Now, talking of humidity, it is important to spray down your tank once or twice a day. You can do this in the morning and the evening. This allows the gecko to keep hydrated and the tank humid. Other things you can add to the tank include hanging coconut hides. My geckos have always loved these, and I even did a tutorial on how to make one yourself. Now on to heating. Now a lot of people believe crested geckos do not need any kind of heating equipment, and this may be true for certain parts of the year depending on where you are geographically. But in the winter, if temperatures get too low, a ceramic heater or deep heat projector can be used to help raise the temperature to a more comfortable level. Remember, always use the correct type of thermostat with these kind of heaters. Now some people say crested geckos just need room temperature, but if you actually look at New Caledonia's weather, it can be surprisingly warm. However, please remember that temperatures over 80 degrees Fahrenheit can be risky and in some cases fatal. The next category is lighting. Now there are 2 main options I can really think of for crested geckos. Both do 2 very different jobs. One is LEDs, so some like the Jungle Dawn that I use help to aid plant growth, but they can also help your gecko distinguish day from night without heating up the tank. The other option is UVB. This is obviously a more natural way for a crested gecko to get D3 into its system. However, if you do use one of these, you're going to want to give your gecko a diet that doesn't contain synthetic D3, which can be a little bit difficult. That moves me on to diet. Now, diet can be pretty simple with crested geckos. You'll see brands such as Repashy and Pangea that do ranges of food for crested geckos where you simply mix powder with water and you're sorted. Now, I tend to prefer Pangea as that gets more of a reaction from my gecko than Repashy. Other diets, including Sticky Foot Gold and the Jelly Pot range from Arcadia, are all natural and don't contain D3, so they can be used with a UVB light. However, Lyra isn't totally sold on those yet. It's also important to offer insects, which I went into far more detail about in a previous video, so I'll link it here. And finally, handling. Now, crested geckos are generally very docile, lovely reptiles that don't mind being handled. However, every gecko is different, and I've heard hatchlings are far more skittish and difficult to initially handle. And that's why personally I've always owned crested geckos that are at least 6 months old. They are known to jump, and it's in their nature to do so, and it's how they'd get from branch to branch in the wild. It shouldn't be seen as a bad thing or a failing on your part to tame them. It's actually best to embrace it and encourage it as it's totally normal. Also, a lot of the time they will tense up their little back legs when they're about to jump, so you can be somewhat prepared. Another thing you may notice when handling them is their pattern or colour intensity can change, and this is known as firing up. You can kind of see Lyra is half fired up, half not. I have just woken her up to film this. I feel very bad. But anyway, there are many reasons firing up and firing down happens, most of which are completely normal and nothing to worry about. One downside though is that crested geckos are notorious for going to the loo whilst they're out and about. But she has just pooped in it. Ew, 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 ew. I don't know if this is something to do with temperature change or just them reacting to being handled, but it's best to carry a piece of tissue with you when handling them just in case. So I hope that's cleared up a lot of your questions. I have an entire crested gecko playlist that I'll pop at the end here, so you can check it out. Basically, if you have any questions, I have probably answered them in the playlist, so please check it out. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys, and goodbye.